Well, hello, welcome. I'm Carol Cavelli, a licensed therapist, and this is the channel that supports the mental and emotional health and wellness of women over 40. And today I have a very special guest in a good friend and colleague, Alyse Freda-Colon. Yay!
Yay, I'm so happy to
Uh,
be here.
thank you, thank you. I'm happy to have you here. So Alyse is a therapist in New York and who helps successful, high-achieving women fix the shit they don't post about. Women who struggle with their relationships, have trouble setting boundaries, and who want their personal life to look as good as their resume does. And Alyse is described as compassionately blunt, which is perfect. So once you get to know her, you'll understand. And bold, like hot pink bold. That is so the truth. Alyse is one of the most dynamic people that I know. Um, she brings that same boldness to her work with therapy clients as well as work with her coaching clients, coaching women and therapists around the country. And welcome, Alyse.
Thanks, Carol. Really, I'm super, super duper excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. Um, so let's start a little bit. Why don't you tell us a bit more about yourself? We had this amazing introduction, but tell tell us a little bit more um, about your practice, but kind of like how you got into therapy and a little bit about your background.
Well, I've always wanted to be a therapist my entire life. I have known this forever. And I have been in private practice. I started in community mental health, as most of us do. And I've been in
Mhm.
private practice since around 2007. Um,
Okay.
And let me just say that it's like the greatest job career in the entire universe for anyone who is contemplating. And private practice is just the best thing you can do, in my opinion. I have male clients, but I work primarily with women. And I found that over the last few years that I'm working with a lot of women who have very, very high powered jobs, women who are CFOs, things like that, where when you see them at work, it's like, wow, they feel like dynamite. And then in their personal lives, they're like, you would not be able to, you wouldn't recognize that person. Like they have
Mhm.
almost one persona here. And then at home, they feel like a doormat or they have no voice, or
Mhm.
what's the point in speaking up? No one listens to me. And so it's almost like this weird like uh, disconnect between who I am in one realm and then who I am in
Mhm.
the other. So lots of times I'm working with women to kind of marry those things and like how do we take the skill set that you obviously possess and then translate that to other areas of your life where maybe you feel
Right.
less competent.
Mhm. Right. So how do you approach that? Like how do you work with someone who has that kind of disconnect?
I tend to be a pretty strengths-based focused
Yeah.
person and therapist. So I like to let's figure out what's working well, right?
Mhm.
What are you doing that is working? So let's say in that example, someone who has risen to the level of being a CFO clearly has a very strong skill set, right? They have determination, they got moxie, they got tenacity. So we want to capitalize on all of the skills that kind of got you where you are. And then how do we translate some of that into the areas of your life where you're less satisfied, right? So
Okay.
translation of skills. What has prevented you from let's say using your voice or being able to speak up or being able to tolerate the discomfort of speaking up? Let's say if you're married to someone who is strong-willed or overbearing, or let's say you have
Right.
a fam like a let's say a mother who tramples all over your boundaries if you have established any boundaries and you feel
Mhm.
like I don't know how to stand up to that. I kind of help you figure out where are the areas of your life that you're less jazzed about and how do we plug in those holes and get you feeling like I got this. I can handle these other areas.
Yeah. So when you mention like those kind of outside relationships or, people that, maybe a spouse or someone that a client is living with, then so I know you don't do couples work. Is that right? Right. So
Absolutely.
so how do you work with someone? So let's say someone is in a situation where they have a very, dominant spouse or a spouse where, your client can't have, kind of assert like who they are with their spouse. Like how do you work with someone to help build that, as well as, have that delicate balance of maintaining the relationship, if that is indeed what they want.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, that's important too. And that's a longer term thing in determining if that's what they want.
Right.
But we do, kind of figure out like, well, how do we get here? Historically, let's do like the analysis of the relationship and how did it come to be? Let's say if it's a woman married to a man and he makes all the decisions and she would like to be involved in the decision making, but what's the point? Because he overrules everything I say anyway. So I've just learned to just go along. Well, are you cool with that? First off, lots of times they're not if they're in therapy. How
Right.
did it come to be, right? Did you ever have a voice? Did it get quieter over the years? So we kind of do an analysis of like, how did we get here? And
Yeah.
then what would it look like if you were able to assert yourself? And then we talk about how that would look, what that might look like in terms of reception from the spouse. How might your spouse respond to that? And I think most importantly is being able to tolerate the discomfort you will feel when you do voice an opinion or you do say something that's kind of off
Right.
script. And how are you going to sit in that if your spouse is like, excuse me? That's what I
Yeah.
think so
Yeah.
many people try to avoid is the discomfort. And so what I hear a lot of
Right.
women say is it's not worth the fight. Like, well, sometimes maybe.
Hmm.
Sometimes it isn't, but it can't always not be worth the fight because all of those little not worth the fights have now added up to you have no voice. So
Right.
sometimes you may need to have a fight and you need to be willing to stand in, no, I'm not okay with that. And be able to withstand
Hmm.
whatever pushback you get. And we do a lot of role playing and practicing,
Okay.
which I'm a big
Okay.
fan of, right? Like, let's try it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know your practice centers a lot on like the here and now, right? Like I know you say like you're taking this, you're making this kind of analysis or out, or I'll say outline of how someone got there, but you're not staying back there. You're saying, okay, we're just looking at how you got here. Let's look at the path. Okay, now you're here. What are we going to do from here going forward?
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of, and I think that sometimes the way that I practice, I feel like a bit of an outlier with a lot of the
Hmm.
colleagues that I have who I, respect immensely. But sometimes when they, talk about the way they practice, I'm always like, wow, I don't know what you're talking
Hmm.
about. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Where do I feel it in my body? And what do you mean grounding exercise? Like, I don't work like that. It's much more about like,
Hmm.
okay, so your husband is gonna like steamroll you. Okay, let's do it. I'm gonna be him, you be you. Let's have this
Yeah.
conversation. Go. And then I want in real time, then we'll switch roles, right? Like, give me your
Yeah.
give me your
Hmm.
scariest scenario, right? Be him. And then I wanted to model what might it look like to have a conversation where you didn't back down. Because
Hmm.
I think that
Hmm.
there's something really valuable in being able to see what that could look like. Even if you
Yeah.
are nowhere near ready to take that step, oh, there's another way. And I think it kind of desensitizes you to the fear of it as you practice
Hmm.
that more and more.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And one of the reasons I wanted you on this like first interviewing episode is because you do practice so differently. You practice very differently than I do. And people should know that there are different ways that people practice and not everything is a good fit, right? So I do the deep dive. Some people want that. Some people don't. Some people want to say, I'm focused, I want to focus on the here and now. So I think it's important for women to know that there are different options in therapists, because I think sometimes maybe what they read or what they look at on the internet, they're not getting like the full breadth of the kind of work that we do. And it's important to know that there are so many different options, and to find someone that fits, how what you want and how you work is important. So
I think
Yeah.
that is so it is so crucial, and I think yeah, it's something that's not really understood. I think that there's a misconception that therapists are somewhat interchangeable, like therapy is therapy.
Yeah.
So many factors. There's the way you practice, which I think most people, just they don't necessarily give a whole lot of thought to like how does someone practice, but like how they vibe, right? Does this feel
Mhm.
comfortable? Does this feel like someone that I can talk to? And yeah,
Yeah.
am I willing? Because I mean, I remember earlier in my career, before I screened better, having someone come in and say, like, I'm looking to do inner child work. I'm like, you are in the wrong place, right? Because that is not what
Yeah.
I do. But I know a lot of people who do that kind of work. So let me hook you up with someone who do
Yes.
it. And it's not better or worse. It's just
Exactly.
different.
That's right. That's right. And people really should consider talking to a few different therapists, get a few different consultations, see the different, approaches, see how people work, how differently they work. Um, I think a lot of times people just go and say, okay, I'm going to find a therapist and I'm just going to sit with this person and work with this person. And then they start feeling like, okay, I'm not either not getting what I need, or this is uncomfortable. This is not really what what
Right.
I want to do in terms of the work I want to do. So yeah, so I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but I do want to get back to, you were talking about like role playing and stuff like that. And something that uh a question that popped in my head is that do you find, kind of circling back, do you find that the women you work with over time, so the ones who do implement, the work that they're doing and the role playing, they feel desensitized, do you find that they start becoming disillusioned in their marriages, let's say, or like do you find like divorce rates go up or like, how does, what
No.
happens?
Not necessarily. And I also, what I typically recommend, I mean, I'm thinking of like 4 clients right now that I'm working with that
Hmm.
we're doing stuff like this. What I typically recommend, I call it, let's try this in a low stakes situation, right? Let's look for something really like nothing important, something really minor that you can begin to assert yourself. Like let's say you're talking about painting the bathroom and your husband is like, well, we're gonna paint it black. And you're like, oh, I hate that color. I would really like yellow. Maybe this is an opportunity to say, you know what? I've thought about it and I'm thinking we should do this, right? And then let him hear your voice. Have a conversation. No, 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 I think black. Well, you know what? Actually, I, I don't really agree with that. That is not a life and death situation. That is a very, very a good example of here is a place where the consequences are not great, where you can begin to, you know what, I disagree. That's not something I want to do. And be willing. No, 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 no. I know it's going to look good. Yeah, but I don't agree. You know what? Here's what I'd like to do. What if we paint a swatch here and a swatch here and we give it a few days and when we talk, like there's an opportunity to assert yourself.
Yeah. And it also sounds like you're taking them out of a place maybe where they would be more like more reactionary. Like, he says, oh, I want to paint it black, and then you're helping her to prevent herself from jumping into, no, I want it yellow. I'm saying, like really having like an emotional reaction. You're like taking her and saying, let's almost like, let's look at this logically, let's look at how this conversation would go logically, and just be calm, be cool, present your case, like that type of thing, but also hold those boundaries and assert yourself,
Oh,
right? Assert yourself without tipping into the emotions
yeah.
flooding and taking over.
What I find too is that I would say the majority of women that I work with, they don't tend to be on that very reactive side. It tends to be much more
Okay.
shut down, like, oh well,
Mm,
that's how he what's the point? It doesn't even matter. I'll just shut up.
okay.
And
Okay.
you
Okay.
are allowed to have a voice. And just because you've gotten into this dynamic of he goes through the charade of saying, hey, I'm going to paint the bathroom, what do you, but you know that he's already decided, you can still say, hey, this is what I think, and he could say, yo, no, that wouldn't look good, but you know what, I think it might, so let's do this and be willing. It's almost, I almost picture it like high winds, like you're like like plant yourself and steady and be willing to, you don't know what you're talking about. I know about colors and that's going to look terrible. Okay, but I think that we should give this a try. So why don't we do this in a very, respectful,
Yeah.
reasonable way? And you're not doing this over like big parenting decisions or like where we should move.
Mhm.
Let's start with something small. One time,
Right.
a woman that I remember wanted to change the layout of the living room, right? Like with all the furniture they already owned. And he was like, no, 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 no. Okay, there's a great opportunity. There's zero risk here.
Right.
Let's move it around. If we don't like it, we can move it back. But like that's an
Mhm.
opportunity to assert yourself. So I like to help women, primarily women, to practice in these low stakes opportunities to set a boundary and then tolerate how it feels to do that. And then gain
Right.
a little bit of confidence for when you need to assert yourself in the bigger issues.
Right, right. So you're tackling like manageable steps, like the manageable step to get to the next step. So ultimately, these women want to be where they can have the higher stakes conversations or assert themselves in the higher stakes situations, but start with the low stakes
You can't
situations.
start. I mean, it's unreasonable to start
Yeah, yeah, of
because
course.
the stakes are too high and you're not ready. It's
Yeah.
like you can't run a marathon before you've, started walking a mile. You need to
Hmm.
and work up to it, in my opinion. And so we
Yeah.
do a lot of that. I'm a big fan of role plays, and it's funny because my clients they either love them or hate them, and I'm like, I know you hate them.
Right.
Could you just humor me and do this because I
Hmm.
want you to see what it looks like, and
Yeah.
not nothing, but like. You're married to this guy. I've never met him. I don't know what his reaction is going to be. I don't know what it's going to look
Mhm.
like. So I want you to give me, let's say his name is Joe. Give me your best Joe. Give me your scariest Joe. Let me
Yeah,
see what
yeah.
that sounds like. So and I want you to see what it would look like to say, I hear you, and here's what I think, as opposed to like, okay, we'll just do it your way because it's easier.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's like it's easier in the moment to just give in or go along because you want to avoid it's not, I want to rock the boat. But that becomes a slippery slope where now you have a very, uneven sort of
Yeah,
power dynamic in the
yeah.
relationship. So at some point, you got to decide what is worth having an argument about.
Right, right. Do you find that your clients' marriages ultimately improve over time? So I can imagine at first for the partner, this has to be a little bit of a culture shock, like, wait, she never did this before. But do you find that that they do kind of work that out as long as she is consistent?
Sometimes what I find interesting too is that sometimes, let's say a husband is encouraging his wife, like, you need to go to therapy. I've had clients whose husbands have gone as far as to find me and say, I'm
Mhm.
looking for a therapist for my wife, which, okay, I need to speak to her.
Yeah.
And then once she starts working with me, they're like, hey, what's going on? This wasn't how it was supposed to go. So they have an idea.
Right.
The therapy will be like, oh, she'll fall in line or whatever, but oh, she's actually learning to assert herself. That wasn't
Yeah.
part of the plan. Sometimes it improves. Sometimes, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I think women can realize, wow, I don't have any boundaries, or I can't believe the shit that I have put up with all of these years.
Yeah.
This is
Okay.
this is too much, or this is so pervasive. I have no,
Right.
or I'm in an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
Really look.
Yeah. Yeah. I would imagine that you do run into that probably fairly often, that women realizing that the relationship is abusive, emotionally abusive, verbally abusive.
And yeah, and sometimes it's too overwhelming to look at. And so someone can present
Yeah.
with like, um, I'm unhappy with this aspect of my relationship, and then realize like, oh, he controls all of the finances, and I don't have access to any of the bank accounts, and I don't know
Right.
what we have. Oh, and he just asked me to sign something. I didn't really read it. I just like, wait a second.
Right. Then it's branching these bigger issues, right?
Right.
These broader issues.
Yeah, but if it's
Yeah.
hard for you to even assert yourself in something, let's say, more mundane than if, you know, a spouse says, here, you need to sign this paper right now.
Right.
And you feel like, I have to, you don't know what you're signing, and then what's going on in your financial life. And, you know, so sometimes there are bigger issues that are going on that it's almost like too much for your brain to process because you're dealing with the stuff over here. So
Yeah.
sometimes it has the effect of like examining, oh, wow, this is not just this issue. This is happening all over.
Right. Right. Okay. I do want to take some time though to kind of pivot a bit to your coaching practice. Um, because I know that's, you know, that's also near and dear to your heart. So tell me a little bit about how you I don't want to say transition because you are a therapist and you're a coach. So tell me a little bit about how you like dipped into coaching.
So coaching, the idea with coaching came about more for being able to work with more clients without, when you're a therapist, you have to sit in front of someone for a session, right? That's the only way that you can generate any income. And as a coach, you can do things with people who are also, you're limited by geography when you're a therapist. You can really only work in the state or states that you're licensed in. So I wanted to be able to work with larger groups of people, yet not have to work more hours, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I work enough therapy hours. I really don't want to be adding a lot more, but I would
Right.
love to be working with groups of people, working with groups of women around the country, you know, whether that's the issues that I work with in coaching. The difference I would say in coaching and therapy is that therapy is a little more, there's more, right? What
Yep.
we're working on is not, it's not, what's the word? Not singular, but it's
Like focused
focus,
or
focus.
okay.
In coaching, it's more focused. Like here's what we're focused. We're working
So very
on
specific.
relationships, or we're working on boundaries, or we're working on self-care, and
Hmm.
try to stick pretty closely to that particular issue. In therapy, you can branch off a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And how are you finding coaching? Like as someone who's a therapist, and then now you're a coach. Like how are you finding that transition to coaching?
I'm finding it very difficult. I'm finding the coaching
Okay.
transition much more difficult than I thought it was going to be. Um, and I don't really know why. What I'm finding that I'm actually enjoying more is coaching therapists. Maybe
Okay.
I speak therapist,
Yeah.
and you know where my practice is today is leaps and bounds from where it started, and talking to therapists who are kind of at that stage of like, I
Mhm.
need to be able to support myself, and I'm on insurance and I hate it, and blah, blah, blah. Like I can speak to that very well. So
Yeah.
I'm having fun coaching therapists in that realm.
Hmm. Right, right. Well, I've been seeing your TikToks. So Alyse has a TikTok account. I can't remember the name of it, but we'll put it in the description below for sure.
Okay.
Um, but it's like your TikToks cover like it covers like talking about therapy as a therapist, talking to people about like maybe like answering their like what would be their questions or maybe like what's on their mind. Um, like I remember one TikTok was, yeah, your therapist does secretly want to be your friend, like stuff like that. And but also it dips into like addressing therapists in terms of their fees. And what's been interesting, I've noticed on several TikToks that you hear from both the therapists and non-therapists about that. And well, tell me, what have you found in terms of like comments and reactions? Because I know what I've seen, but I wanted to see what you've picked up from that.
It's kind of like I love talking to, so I talk about therapy, what it's like to be in therapy, issues that I thought were more specifically for therapists that a lot of people chime in who are not therapists or who are therapy clients. And what I found really interesting is the number of people who have, like, let's say I'm talking about a therapist wanting to get off insurance and all the fears around that, or if they just want to be self-pay, but they worry they're going to limit access or they're not going to be able to continue to work with clients. So many people who have said, I would pay any amount of money in the world to see my therapist. My therapist should make, and almost this like love and admiration for the therapist. And it always, every time I read one of those, I'm like, oh, it like makes me so happy for our profession that there are so many people
Yeah.
who hold their therapist in such high regard. Because you also hear some, crappy stories where you're like, that's not okay. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
primarily a lot of people saying, I wish I could pay my therapist more. I wish my therapist didn't take insurance and I could pay her higher if they,
Hmm.
is that allowed? I'm like, no, no, you can't do that. Just on insurance.
Yeah. Yeah. I was really like surprised that a lot of people supported therapists, charging more for their fees. Like they're so greatly underpaid. They go through all this schooling, and how are they supposed to survive? And so, yeah, so that was very, very interesting to me.
One of the things
And
that I find pretty consistently pervasive. I made a video today that I'm going to post about it.
mhm,
How freaking judgy therapists are towards other therapists. I'm not kidding. You know this, Carol. You know,
I
if you've
know, I
ever been
know.
in a therapist Facebook group, there is this
Mhm.
contingent of people who are like these cranky, judgy therapists. Like that, that you may want to make money, but I do this because I care about people. Screw you, stop it. Stop it. Stop judging other
Yeah,
people. If you want to be poor and do things the way you did them 30 years ago, knock yourself out. But like
yeah,
get all over people who are trying to do something different or who don't see helping someone and making money as mutually exclusive. I gave an example recently. My husband just had to have a minor surgery done, and
oh, okay.
surgeon was lovely, could not have been nicer, right?
Hmm.
And we got a bill for $4,000. At no point did I get that bill and say, well, if this guy really cared about people, he wouldn't be charging money for them.
Right,
Brr. It was not even a thought of
right.
mine. He is he is a skilled professional. He cares about his patients clearly, and he makes a good living. Nobody's pointing at him saying, "Ah, I thought you got into this because you wanted to help people."
Right, right.
Why is our field so different?
Yeah, I mean, oh, that's a really good question. Well, this could go in so many different directions. I think one of the directions that our field is predominantly women, and women are expected to give and give and give and sacrifice. And professions that are women dominated, aren't held in high regard in terms of earnings. So, teaching might be leaning more like 50-50. I'm not sure, but one time, it was so rare to have a male teacher, and it was the same thing, like, oh, teaching is a noble profession, you're teaching our children, but you're not going to get paid that much. And it's the same thing for social work. That's my opinion. I think that's one. I'm not saying that's all of it. I think that's just one big component. Um,
I think
yeah.
also, I think that we are trained in school and then it almost like um brainwash is a little strong, but like there's this messaging that you get that you're in this to help and it's not about you. And I remember being in grad school, um, date myself in the early 90s.
Mhm.
And there were, I went to Columbia University. There were 3 tracks you could take at Columbia.
Mhm.
You could do like policy, um, I guess like admin, I don't remember. And then
Yeah, admin, policy, and clinical.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
was in the clinical track since I've always known I wanted to do
Yes.
the it wasn't even veiled, it was blatant judgment against us. And the people who were in the clinical track were the sellouts. That was evident. And that is the way, I'm not saying that the staff necessarily, but that was just the vibe we got. Like, oh,
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
the over here, we're the real ones. And you guys are the sellouts who are just doing this as a path to private practice.
yeah,
That it was almost like a lack of credibility, but like you were in it for the wrong reasons. You're supposed to be
yeah.
selfless and you're not supposed to do this to have a business and make money.
Right.
And I don't think that that's changed very much. I know.
I don't, yeah, I don't think so either. I don't think so either. I mean, I went to grad school in like 2004. I graduated in 2007. It was a similar vibe. Yeah. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with having a private practice and wanting your own business. And I don't know if you saw this. This was so Tiffany McLean. So we both went through Tiffany McLean's program. Lena McBank, she did a stitch where someone was talking about this very topic about well about how therapists should be just doing this to help people and just be happy making subpar salary for all the education and the continuing education and the renewal of licensing and all this stuff. I mean, it's not a profession that's one and done. It's a profession that you have to continuously grow. I mean, if you want to be a good clinician and if you want to, help people to as best as you can. But in that stitch, she, you know, says that it's okay to have this lower fee if you are wealthy. If you are earning what you need to earn to survive, then it's okay to, to have reduced slots or to do, pro bono work. But you have to, it's again, it's like being on the airplane, right? The oxygen comes down. You have to put your mask on before you put the other person's mask on, or you're going to suffocate.
I think that
So,
we mostly start in community mental health. And knowing people who are in community mental health, I am continually shocked at the number of clients that they're being asked to see in a day. I
oh
mean,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I,
Mm-hmm.
I naively thought that that would have changed over time, and I guess I'm just out of that world.
Yeah.
But I think that what people do, because we don't know any better, because nobody teaches us anything about this, is that we replicate what we know. And so if
Yeah.
you if you're at a community mental health and they're saying, oh, well, you could see 16 people a day, and don't take a break in between. And don't everybody's got a reduced fee and you don't have to worry about it because the receptionist will take care of the billing. It's like, oh, you never see the exchange of money. You don't even know what's going on there. All you know is that people come to see you and they pay less. So you go into your own practice. It's like, all right, what can you afford? Oh, okay. And
Yeah.
you can't afford to operate like an agency that is funded and that has money coming to it and then has a staff to support it. Yet we somehow step into that trying to offer low rates when we can't even pay our own bills
Yeah. Yeah.
and all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a big piece of that speaks as far as like community mental health and agency, that really speaks to the lack of funding or the reduced funding or the cuts that always happen, right? It keeps the agency and the clinics in this position where they have to see these amount of people, right? So yeah, so nothing has really changed there. But yeah, so you leave that setting and you still like are in that uh kind of trauma response. This is how I'm supposed to this is how I'm supposed to operate a practice. And then you realize, as you're out of it for a bit and you connect with other yeah, therapists in private practice, some private pay, some not, you make other connections and then you start to realize that this is a business and you start to figure, okay, what do I need to do? And then of course it evolves and changes based on where you want it to go. Like, so with you, therapist and now evolving into coach. And I know you're not giving up the therapy, but it's just another evolution. Like, okay, I'm adding this into my skill set, and this is what I can offer.
Yeah.
So
People
it's a growing
people
process.
make the argument a lot that you need to be accessible. I need to be accessible to people. And then they have these random ideas about what that means. Like, well, I need to keep my fees low, vaguely, low to be
Yeah.
accessible. Okay, what is that fee? Well, I need to keep my
Yeah.
fee at $50 because that's accessible. Oh, really? What about people who can't afford
Yeah.
$50? Right? So it's like this, there's almost like this I'll say holier than thou, sort of like, well,
Mm.
I'm going to keep my fee low so that I can be accessible. But there's many people who wouldn't be able to afford that. So what do you say to that? Should you get zero? Should you charge zero so that it's accessible to anyone?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this actually circles back to where we started. So we started talking about eh, finding the right fit therapist, as a client. Right. And some therapists are very, hardcore about, yeah, I'm going to take all the insurances. I'm going to, offer, my reduced fees, and bless them if they're in that position that they can. You don't know someone's specific, that their what their life space situation is, right? So that might be fine for them. That might be okay. And as a client, then it's finding what's going to be the fit. So yeah, so we're kind of meandering into a whole other topic. But it is important. But yeah, but like I said, it does, when it comes down to it, there are therapists who do take insurance. There are therapists who have lower fees, and there are therapists who have premium fees. And it's up to really the client what's going to be the best fit,
And I would just
right?
say to the therapist also, who is whether they're taking a lot of insurance or they have reduced fees, I would just recommend just make sure you understand why you're making those decisions. How did you arrive at that? Does it make sense from a business perspective? And can you afford to be giving away
Oh,
services?
sure.
You afford to have lower rates? Or are you doing it out of fear? Are you doing it out of habit? Or are you doing it in a deliberate way that is well thought out and that supports you financially?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a different story as opposed to someone who is bound in insurance and they're struggling to make ends meet. I mean, that's a whole other situation. And to those people, connect with private pay therapists. If that's not working for you, now you're looking at a business model, right? If your business model was, I'm taking insurance, and that was my business model, and it was yours for a number of years,
Long time.
and yeah, so then it's like, well, wait, this business model isn't working, right? We have to kind of peel back the moral aspect from it. When therapists who are private pay are not immoral because they don't take insurance. It's just, it can't be a part of their business plan. I know for me, I forced it to be a part of my business plan as long as I could, to a point where it's like I can't cut back on anything else in my life. I just can't. I've cut everywhere I could cut. And I need to pivot. I need to earn more, right? So in the business, you either cut things. I mean, this is very simplistic. You either cut things or you find a way to earn more. And if this is going into mindset, if you have more of a deprivation mindset, you're like, cut, 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 cut. And then you realize I can't cut anymore. And it's like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And then it's like, oh, wait, I have to figure out how to earn more. And that could be coming off insurance. That could be adding another service. Again, it's a business model. But if the business model isn't working, then
Mhm.
it's like, then it's figuring out how to fix it. And I know that's kind of where you're delving in with the coaching for therapists in terms of, you know, uh, fees, and people who are in this situation who feel that, okay, I'm not earning enough. Maybe I've cut as much as I could. I don't know what else. I don't know
Yeah.
what else to do. So I'm going to talk to Alyse.
what you had to do.
because
Look
she's
how
dynamic and bold. And I remember when you got off insurance, and that was a huge transition for you. And like, but you did it in like one day, and that worked for you. But again, there's different ways to approach it. But it's finding out what, for the therapist, it's finding out what's best. And this also applies to anyone who runs their own business. If you're running a business and you're realizing, okay, I'm not earning what I need to earn, to live, to survive, to thrive, to have the things I want in life, then it's like looking at that business model. But we're not business, we're therapists in business.
and that's not that there's nothing wrong with that. But if you
I
even
don't have my MBA, so I'm not an expert, but I can speak to a little bit about my experience as a business owner.
you look at your story, even like I tried, I had to cut, like you were almost in desperation. You had tried
Oh,
so many,
100%.
and
100%.
then and people want to say, oh, therapists need to be accessible. They need to bend. And I was looking at the incomes, the yearly incomes of the behavioral health CEOs. The top six were between 22 million a year to 17 million a year. How about those guys? How about those guys can figure out how to make therapy more accessible and not screw therapists and steal money back from them years later and all the other
Yeah.
shit that they do.
Yeah.
I want people to stop blaming therapists and when therapists to stop assuming responsibility for a completely broken healthcare system. Let the
Mhm.
blame lie with the people who are collecting $22 million a year. They can figure it
Right.
out.
Right.
Thank you.
And that's across the board in a lot of corporations too.
Agreed.
But
Agreed.
yeah. So I'm thinking that if there is anything that I there was something else I wanted to bring up with you. Um I'm losing my thought. We went on a whole other track. But so how do people best find you?
I'm everywhere, Carol.
You really are. You're
I'm mostly on TikTok just because I find it easier to navigate and I have so much fun with it.
yeah.
Um, I also, let's see, so it's you know what? Let's just tell the people what it is because
Because you're on LinkedIn as well. You're on TikTok, which is awesome. And you're on LinkedIn as well. And that's what I wanted to bring up was like your LinkedIn series. So I do want to touch on that. But first
okay.
let's
Alyse the therapist is my Alyse, no, Alyse the New York therapist. I don't know. Alyse the New York therapist on TikTok. Here's what I did.
okay.
I really only like TikTok, but it felt very wasteful to like only have stuff on TikTok and nowhere else. So I
Hmm.
found this company that repurposes everything that I do. So it just pulls from my TikTok and
Gotcha.
it puts it on all the other. Now, the appropriateness of what I'm doing on TikTok on other platforms, I don't know. I don't know if it's cool with LinkedIn. Nobody has said, hey, you can't do that on LinkedIn, so I'm just doing.
Right.
It's on Instagram, it's on Facebook. So everything just gets put there. Interestingly, there's no order. So there's videos that I made 3 years ago that are now being put. So it's kind of cool to look at like, oh, wow, look at what I was doing then. Or I didn't have it down because it's a much stiffer in a lot of these videos. So it's
Yeah.
kind of cool to watch. But so yeah, I'm on it's some version of Alyse the therapist, Alyse the New York therapist, or coaching with
Right.
Alyse, and it's ALYSE. So you can find me all over the
Well, we'll find you on our end and put it in the description.
Okay.
We will get the right account in the description for
You're
you.
talking about the divorce. Do you need a therapist or a divorce?
Yes, yes, yes. So Elise has a series that she does. Do you need a divorce lawyer? Do you need a therapist or a divorce lawyer, or is it the other way around?
A therapist or a divorce lawyer?
Yeah, yeah. So you do this series with a family law attorney,
Uh-huh.
and you go through different questions and you respond from both ends. If you need a therapist, this is what I look at. If you need a divorce lawyer, this is what you should do. It's a
Yeah,
great series.
we started. We were talking about some of the overlap in our careers and how we hear some of the same things from people, right? And sometimes you're approaching it from, am I trying to salvage this relationship? And sometimes it's, girl, it's time to get out, right? So yeah, so we did this series of all of these questions that we have heard over the years and answered them, and then we post them on LinkedIn and on all the various things. And we're talking about doing the next series, yeah, which we were just chatting about the other day. So there's going to be a new one coming. So everyone get excited for that.
Awesome. And that will also be on TikTok as well. Is that just on LinkedIn?
It's no, it's on I post everything on TikTok
Okay. And then you shipped it to
it gets posted on
LinkedIn.
everything else. So you see it on TikTok first, but
Okay.
a lot of people are kind of like TikTok, like they're afraid
Mhm.
of it. So I'm glad that some of this content is getting, is getting to other places as well.
And I just want to ask you one more question. What is one thing that you want people to understand about the work that you specifically do?
If you come to me, whether it's for coaching or therapy, my goal is to help you figure out what's working in your life, what isn't working, how do we get you from here to where you want to be? Very simplistically, what's the
Awesome.
goal? And I'll say to people sometimes, imagine we work together and we finished yesterday. And you were like, oh my God, that was the best experience ever. I love this therapist so much. She helped me beyond what I could explain. How does your life look today? How do
Mhm.
you know we were successful? What does that look like?
Right.
So that
Right.
we get a clear picture of what we're doing, and then let's do it.
Mhm. Awesome. Awesome. So great. Thank you so much. This is a great conversation and went in all these different directions. So I think a lot of people will get a lot of information, whether you are a woman over 40, if you're a woman under 40, or even if you're a therapist, you get a lot of information from this video. And again, we'll put in the description where to find Alyse, because Alyse is awesome.
Come find
And
me. Please come look at my very sad
go
YouTube.
to Elisa's
YouTube
TikTok
chat.
and you can see her outfit of the day.
I do those sometimes too. I suck at them, but I
That's
keep
awesome.
trying.
No, you do a great job. Like you'll show something and say, "Oh, I got this at a thrift store." I'm like, "What thrift store did she get that at?"
I, I,
Because we both know like your area, and
yeah,
I'm like, where does she get that
thrifting is
from?"
another passion of mine, and
Yeah,
I am so good at it. And
cool.
let me just tell you this, just in terms of
Yeah.
therapy, like a little out of the box. I'm doing a little field trip with a client who has been on like a weight loss journey, but she doesn't want to invest in a new wardrobe, but she really wants to
Hmm.
put in her clothes, which I'm a huge fan of. So we are going to do a session at a thrift shop. We're going to meet there. We're
Nice.
going to, because she's very much like that. I'm like, okay,
Wait,
let's
are you meeting there to shop? Or are you meeting there to
meet in
donate
there.
the clothes that
No, no,
don't?
no, no. We're meeting there to shop. We're meeting
Oh,
there to shop. I've known
that
her
is so
for
cool.
15 years, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna have her try stuff on that's outside of her box and
Yeah.
help her to find stuff that's very inexpensive that is gonna make her feel like $1 million on this weight loss,
Awesome.
right? That's the
That's
kind
awesome.
I like that kind of thing makes me like so excited.
Yeah. Very unique, very imaginative. Everyone go see Alyse. She's awesome. If you want to work with like present day, what's happening now, and work on that going forward. If you are interested in role playing, Alyse is the
I'm your
therapist for
girl.
you.
I'm your girl.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks,
And
Carol.
I will see you soon.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye. Thank you for joining my conversation with Alyse. If you would like more information on working with Alyse or myself, you can check the description box below for our information. And if you found this video or this interview helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. And if there are other topics you'd like me to talk to other therapists or other people on, just comment below. I'll do my best to get the proper professional so we can have that conversation. And if you feel that other people that you know can benefit from this video, please share and like and subscribe. It really helps the algorithm and helps get the videos out there to the women who can really benefit from them. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.